Hey Rockstars, I'm JB, expert salesperson and master presenter.
I'm the doctor, psychologist, and behavioral expert.
This is the Entrepreneur Mastery Lab podcast.
We're high-performance coaches that help service-based professionals and entrepreneurs take their skills to the next level.
70% of entrepreneurs fail, which is why every week we have real talk with real entrepreneurs to help ensure you are not one of them.
We're also the inventors of the Be Rich mindset,
where we rise to mastery,
inspire greatness,
celebrate knowledge,
and help others along the way.
So join us in the lab.
And now, on to the show.
What's up, everybody? What is up live? We did something different, everybody. So anybody listening in, we did something a little different this time. We took a look at the questions we got, and we thought about, our themes for the last few weeks, and we tried to pull a question that was directed by our themes. So, as we had themes around mentorship in our group, we had themes around finding evidence. We had themes around, what other themes do we have, Doc? Habits and routines this week, right?
Habits and routines, yes.
And we've got an up and coming theme as well. Self-awareness. So we try to find some questions that kind of fit those topics, because we felt like there's some good response around some of those topics.
And that's where you guys come in handy, because our theme that's coming up of self-awareness came up from the question that was asked. We said, oh, that sounds like a great theme coming up. So we appreciate when you guys send us some questions and when you give us feedback and you interact with us, because it helps us make sure that we're getting content that you want to hear.
So keep bringing it on. We love it. All right, which one of these you want to kick off with, Doc? Which one's what's your favorite to chew on here with peeps?
The one that's formed in a question.
Thanks. That was, you just changed my life. All right,
it can be helpful.
Let's start with the one I enjoyed the most. Finding evidence. I'm not a scientist. What are you even talking about? Fair question.
Very fair.
So why don't I pitch that over to the doctor, the scientist among us, and let him take the horns on that one for the time being.
Good thing I am a scientist, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a scientist to find evidence. So when we talk about finding evidence, we talk about how do we look at the things that we've done and what do we take from them? What are things that other people have done and what can we take from them? So finding evidence is just basically looking at results and using that to put towards what we do next from the scientific point of view. Now, we could also find evidence in other ways, which I'll let JB talk about in a second, but I'm going to take the scientific side. And why this is important is it's data. We have data that we can use, so we don't have to guess on a lot of stuff. We can just look at how things have gone and make an educated guess on how things can go in the future. So from a scientific point of view, that's how we use evidence. And we use it a lot in psychology also, because when people are having what we call irrational thoughts that don't really make sense, but we get stuck in them all the time. Everyone has irrational thoughts. We worry about what's going to happen. We do some fortune tell thinking, where we assume what's going to happen the worst. We do black and white thinking, where it can only be one of two ways. And the best way to challenge those things is to find the evidence if those things are true or not. So if we say, if I do this, it's going to fail. Okay, well, how do we know it's going to fail? It could fail. It could also be awesome. So you look at the evidence. Well, I've done something similar to this in the past. Did it fail? Well, one time it failed and two times it was successful. Okay, so it could go either way. So we have some evidence there. We could look at some more evidence and say, oh, it's never been as bad as I thought it was. Okay, so then maybe I'm thinking that it's going to be worse than it is. And I do that a lot, but the evidence usually shows it's never that bad. And that's how we find evidence, again, from a psychological standpoint, to challenge some of those irrational beliefs. Before I get too scientific, JB, do you want to throw in some other ways that we would find some evidence in the sales world?
Yeah, just thinking through, Doc, and I hope you don't mind, but the whole time you're talking, I was just modeling out different ways to think and look real thoughtful and deep in thought.
Is that what you were doing? I thought you were constipated.
Could be both. I do some of my best thinking on the toilet. Come on. Yeah, finding evidence in sales. So, to me, in sales, it's when we're in business in general, when we're a service-based entrepreneur, when we're a professional, right? We know we have a service. We know we have clients with a need, and that we can serve that need, right? So we can fix a problem for somebody, whether they're aware of that problem or not. We can make them aware of the problem. We can fix it for them. The question becomes, how well can we fix it, or how quickly can we fix it? Because for a lot of us, we're in business because hopefully we enjoy what we do and we're following something of a passion, but we're also in business because we are trying to produce, and we're trying to produce for something, and hopefully for more than just the sake of money. It goes back to our be rich mindset. It's not just about being rich with money, but it's about all those other things: rising mastery, inspiration, celebration, and helping. So when we try to get more efficient and more effective and produce better with less resources, including time and assets, we need really good systems and processes to do that. We need to be able to test what we're doing. And one of the easiest places to test is sales. And here's why. In a lot of ways, if you're targeting the right people, they have a similar profile. So they're similar, right? Person A, person B, person C, they're all fairly similar because you're targeting them. You're speaking to your audience, and generally what you're going to say. Hopefully, specifically, what you're going to say, Doc. And what that allows you to do is figure out, is what I'm saying resonating with the people I'm talking to, right? Are they responding to it? And if they're responding to it, how well are they responding to it? Well, let me try to tweak it a little bit. Let me try to change it a little bit. Let me test, and let me see, out of all these tests and iterations where I kind of have a lot that's controlled, what changes can provide the best results. And that's where we find in sales, finding evidence is a really big tool, because it allows us to kind of take a control and then just make minor changes to figure out, does that control make the most sense? And that evidence allows us to become better at business and save us time, energy, and accomplish all those things we really want to actually accomplish through the means of our business or the means of our profession. That might have been a little bit more long-winded than you were looking for, but I think it's a really important concept to get across to people. Sales is one of the easiest places to find evidence to drive results to make you better.
Never assumed it's long-winded when you're talking, so just feel good. It's explanatorial. It's explanatorial. That's a good word I just made up.
You definitely made that one up.
We are coining that word, explorative. I like it. Sounds professional. Yes, but I think finding evidence it's probably one of the most important things you can do in parts of your life, right? So like I said, in the psychological sense, in the scientific sense, as JB just said, in the sales sense, it gives you some good confirmation that what you're doing, it could relieve some anxiety. It could take away some of the stress that you might be feeling about going into something. And it very easily just can give you some good insight on how to pivot, right? So, everything we really do in life is an experiment. That's why I don't really think of as failures, right? I think we've talked about this before on here and definitely on the podcast. Failures don't really exist because everything we do is just a giant science experiment. Everything we're doing in life, in business, is we're running an experiment. We're testing a hypothesis, and our hypothesis is what we think is going to happen. And as we run that experiment, we find out which ways are better, which ways are more efficient, which ways are more successful. But the ones that we think of as failures are really just teaching lessons on that's not the best way to do it, and let's make some adjustments. And that's what evidence is. Evidence shows you what works, what doesn't work, how to pivot, how to make the best adjustments. And when multiple things work, which one works better. So that's all evidence is just using the everyday science experiment that we're doing in life and and keep building on that using the evidence that we learned from that experiment.
One of the things I love about what you're talking about there, Doc, is it's nature. You know, this is who we are. The world we live in, our reality is all science-based. Science should not be, to people, in my mind, something scary or intimidating or difficult to understand. It's the natural. And it's just, you know, it's just kind of figuring out what works best. It's the experimentation. I absolutely love that. Why do some people have success and why do some people not? And chances are you got a lot of people out there with success who have just experimented. They've tried a lot of different things until they found something that really worked for them. They aren't geniuses. They aren't operating on a different plane of understanding than you, me, or anybody else. They just actually went out there and tried. They weren't afraid of that failure word, right? The F word didn't scare them because I think they recognized, hey, this is not about failure. This is just about trying to find something that works. Huge mindset change there, right?
Yeah, it's all about learning. And that's what a failure is, just another way to learn what not to do the next time.
A good one. I like this topic. I can geek out over this all day long. That was a good question, though. Hopefully that helps clear it up a little bit.
And if you're on our live right now, feel free to answer questions in the chat box so we can answer them live. Also, you can just say hi in there so we know you're here. We'd love to get some, we'd love to wave back to you and interact with us. We're here. That's why we're here live, to do that.
I mean, I can have fun with this guy all day, but I wouldn't mind hearing from y'all if you're out there. Give us some love. Give us a shout. Let us know where you're at, what you're doing, what you're eating, what your lunchbox looks like. I want to know.
Is yours as cool as my R2 lunchbox?
Or as boring as my gray canvas bag? Whatever. Don't judge. There's no superhero on mine. Should be Superman, though.
Really should be.
It should be Superman. All right, let's jump over to our next question, Doc. I've got some bad habits. Who doesn't? How do I break them? How do I break a bad habit? I'm really struggling to get past this.
I'm going to save you because, like, as soon as I heard breaking habits, I want to start singing Linkin Park. My voice is not quite as, almost as good as Chester's, but not quite there. So, because I don't know, would Facebook shut us down if I start singing poorly?
I might shut us down if you start singing poorly. So don't worry about Facebook. You're all welcome, by the way.
It might come out on accident just because it's stuck in my head on a loop now.
Hey.
Breaking habits. This is a fun one. And so first off, I'll say the same thing that I like to, as a caveat for, because we talked about habits and routine a lot this actually last week. These are all just behaviors. So it's all under the same category as a behavior. And everything we do are two things: thoughts and behaviors. We are just fancy animals. We've just evolved a little bit more than some of the other animals that made us a little bit more fancy. We have things like internet and cell phones and Gucci bags and stuff like that. So that makes us a little bit more fancy, but otherwise we're just really animals. So everything is just thoughts and behaviors. And sometimes we call them habits, sometimes we call them routines. And so just get the thought of everything that we do as a behavior, and any behavior you have, you can change. Some are harder than others, some take longer than others, but any behavior that you have can change and be adjusted. So just give yourself hope that if there's something that you're doing, you want to change it, you can do it. Not always easy, but it can be done. So the first thing when you are changing a behavior, breaking a habit, is you need disruption. You have to disrupt what you've been doing. As long as you keep doing what you've been doing, it will never, ever change. So you have to disrupt that behavior in some way. And once you start to disrupt it, then you have to continue on. And there's different ways to do that, which I'm going to go into in a second, but I just want to hear what JB has. He seemed like he was either constipated again or had a good thought there.
Yeah, I don't know if Facebook would kick me off for flicking you off, but I'm about to. So
Stone cold.
I was kind of curious. Yeah, I do have a lot of thoughts here. I was kind of curious in your opinion, how large of a disruption do we really need? Does it need to be like this big disruption, or does it need to be just a tiny little, just enough to get us off track?
I will give you a guess on what I'm going to say.
I hate you so much sometimes. Can I say what you're going to say?
Sure.
It depends.
It does depend. And it does depend because some of those habits, routines, behaviors are very ingrained in us. And they're going to need a bigger distraction, and they're going to need a bigger disruption into that, right? So others, what we're doing can just be more subtle, and just a little bit of a disruption can start to make a change. Generally, it's one of the smaller ones, right? Like just to start to make the disruption. But here's the thing, and this is what I was going to go on to next. And I guess I'll just do that now because it's a natural segue, and we love natural segues. Dude. Anytime we're changing a behavior, we need three things. I call them the 3 R's. We need to be able to review the behavior we want to change. We need to repeat that behavior over and over, which we like to call practice. And then we need to reward or reinforce that behavior. So if we do those 3 things, we can change any behavior or habit that we have. The key to when you're wanting to change the behavior first is that disruption, right? You disrupt what you're doing and you insert those new things that we're trying to do. So if you are, give me a habit that you want to break, JB.
I'm a smoker and I want to no longer be a smoker.
Okay. So when do you generally smoke?
After I eat and when I'm out socializing with other people.
Right. So those become routine, right? Like that is something that your body starts to trigger. I finished eating, I need to smoke a cigarette, and you do it over and over again. So it just becomes natural. It's an automatic thought. We don't put any thought into doing that. We just go do it. So this is where it becomes difficult when you're changing the behaviors, because now you actually have to have a conscious thought to stop something. Our brain works about 95% of the time in subconscious thoughts. We don't actually think about what we're doing. We're really less than 5% of the time that our brain is active. We're actively thinking about what we're going to do next. So when we are adding that disruption, we have to actively think about changing that, because if as soon as you stop eating, the first thing you're going to want to go do is smoke the cigarette. So this is where you have to say, I can't do that. And then you have to go do something else. So maybe go for a walk, or maybe go have a conversation with someone in a place where you can't smoke. Like do something different than you would normally go do right after you would eat. So that's the part of the disruption. And then this is where you have to do those 3 R's that I'm talking about, right? Because just disrupting it, you can wind up going right back to it after if you don't know what you're actively going to do next. This is where you're saying, hey, when I am done eating, I need to make sure that I'm not smoking, because that's the habit I'm trying to change. I do not want to smoke. So you have to tell yourself that right as you start eating, while you're eating, when you finish eating, you have to make sure that you're talking to yourself and reminding yourself that you need to do that. You need to review what you need to change. Then you need to actively do it, right? That's where the repeating it comes in, the practice. So you have to make sure that you are not going to smoke right after and doing something else instead. And then once you do that, you need to reinforce that by telling yourself, oh, you did a great job today of, not smoking in that moment when you normally do. Because your brain doesn't know right from wrong. It just knows whatever you would reinforce. So in that moment, you're telling yourself that this is what we want to do next. But that has to continue happen over you have to keep competing it, consistently completing that task. Otherwise, you will fall right back into it, because our brain does not have a delete key. So it is very important to make sure that you're doing those 3 R's once you do that disruption. Otherwise, you're just going to go fall right back into the same routine and that same habit right away.
Yeah, that was not a generic thing I threw out there. I did smoke for years, and it was a terribly difficult habit to break. Really difficult habit to break. And there's some other actionable things that I think you can do to like help break a bad habit, namely making it harder to do and putting yourself in a position where it's more difficult to do. I'll give you another maybe more generic example, or even around that. If you're having trouble waking up in the morning when you feel like you need to wake up to get your day started, one of the best things you can do is put yourself in a position where you have to be up, you have some serious responsibility that needs to get done by a certain time of the day. Maybe you book an early breakfast meeting with somebody. And if you think you can't do that, well, go find somebody. If you live here on the East Coast of the United States, go find somebody in, England to go speak to and do a Zoom meeting with. And guess what? You'll probably be up fairly early in the morning, get that done. It's an interesting thing. If you put yourself in a position where it's harder to keep doing the habit, it's harder to smoke because I don't have cigarettes on me, or I'm not carrying a lighter, or, I'm not allowing myself time to go have a cigarette, or I'm changing how I socialize, or if it's, hey, I'm going to get up earlier in the morning because I have to get something done. And you put that responsibility on yourself and you make it harder to avoid that habit. It's going to be a lot easier to break. It really is. And it makes a big difference. But habits are not easy. Things like that are not easy. And Doc, I would argue, to the point you made at the end there, really, really big point, we revert back, and it's really easy to kind of slip back into our old habits and our bad habits. And that's something that I think most of us struggle with quite a bit. I form a new routine and a new habit where I'm doing all these things and I'm feeling really, really good about it. And then I disrupt the new habit, right? Something disrupts the new habit, and we see that impact right away, because that's what causes us to slip back into our old bad habits.
Well, it is because our brain doesn't have that delete button, like I was saying, right? So we
Exactly.
don't get rid of the old behavior that we're trying to change, no matter how long it's been. Like, you can quit smoking 20 years ago, that's still in your brain, and it will still try to sneak out occasionally. So what we've done is we try to build the new habit, the new routine, the new behavior in front of that, and make it strong and strong by doing it over and over. And that's why you say you have to be consistent with it, because you've been doing it for a long time. Especially, it wants to pop back up. It wants to show its face. It wants to come to the forefront, and subconsciously it will poke its head out and be like, hey, this is a behavior I used to do. You used to go smoke right after you eat. Let's go do that. And you will, unless you are actively saying you're not going to. And that's why it's important to keep reviewing that and saying those 3 R's over and over again. And using like the tools like JB said, yes, there's a lot of ways that we can implement tools and strategies to help this along. But to go back to the core, it's really, you have to do those 3 things and do them consistently, because your brain will try to do the old things that it's been doing for so long.
All right. So one more time, Doc: review, repeat, reward.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, that reward one's interesting. Because I think it's really easy to beat ourselves up when we fail. And I know there are no real failures, but when we slip back, it's easy to beat ourselves up, and sometimes it's a lot harder to reward ourselves. So I remember when I did quit smoking, my reward was I implemented a new habit of exercise. I started training for a triathlon. So I'm one of those crazy MFers that went from smoking a pack a day to running, biking, and swimming every day, and completing a triathlon a few months later. My reward was my health, which I felt mentally, physically, emotionally, every single day. And I did have a couple slip ups early on when I quit. I quit cold turkey. I pulled a cold turkey, and not the easiest thing to do. And I definitely had a slip up or two, especially when I went out drinking. Alcohol can be nasty for habits, and letting go of yourself a little bit. But the reward, it's an amazing thing. And without it, I don't think there's any habit out there where, if you're not trying to reward yourself or making a real effort to reward yourself and following through on that end, I don't know that you'll ever really get out of a bad habit. So probably all 3 of those are important, but without reward, man, I don't know. I don't know that there's much you're going to be able to get done.
Reward is one of the most important ones. It's the most overlooked, because also when we hear reward, which is also the other way to say it, is reinforcement. When we hear reward, we always think it has to be something major. Like, I have to go buy myself something. I have to go get something. I have to go do something that really stands out, that like a thank you. But really, a reward, and while it should be done in the big moments too, it really should be done every time you do the change. So they don't need to be big. It really just needs to be that you're telling yourself thank you. Give yourself a high five. it really just needs something to be small, because all that reward is really doing is reinforcing in your brain that this is what we want to do now. Because again, your brain doesn't know right from wrong. All your brain knows is whatever you do consistently, and then you reinforce it in your brain that that's what you want to do. Bad habits, good habits, no matter what habit it is, it will continue to happen as long as your brain thinks that's what you're supposed to do. So when we say reward in that context, it's really just every time you catch yourself doing the right thing, the thing that you're trying to change, you have to make reference to it in your brain that you are doing the right thing. And that's what reinforces the habit that you're trying, the new behavior, to continue going. And that's why it's super important.
It's a powerful one. Habits and routines, process. If you're not focused on that stuff, I think you're missing a major area for self-improvement and personal development in business, as a professional or as an individual in life. It's just it's a big part of it. We are what we do without thinking. Our base instincts and habits, kind of, that's who we are. You said it, Doc. We're fancy animals in a lot of ways. I know you've said that quite a few times, and it's true, right? So it's about consciously reprogramming some of those habits, I suppose, is how I would put it. It's an important thing to focus on.
And it's hard to do. And it's definitely hard to do alone for certain habits and routines and behaviors, especially some, challenging ones that you need that outside source of motivation, or that reinforcement from others. That's why there's coaches. That's why there's therapists. That's why that there's good friends. That's why there's all these groups that you can join. That's why, like JB was saying, call somebody in England if that's something you need, because that's going to be a good reinforcement for you. Like, don't be afraid to employ others into your success. They're good disruptors, but make sure it's the person who's got the same goal in mind for you, right? Because they can easily default you right back to whatever you were doing if they are also a partaker in whatever that old behavior was. So just choose wisely. And that's where professional help comes in a lot, because their goal is to be your goal.
And when we're digging into this, Doc, we're really talking application here. How do we apply this? So we disrupt, we review, we repeat, we reward. I can talk, I promise. But the application of how do we apply the science here and the psychology here, and the accountability of having somebody in your corner, somebody to call you out, is a big one. The why behind it is a really big one too. If you're trying to break a habit, what I found helps a lot is you make a deal with yourself. You commit and you negotiate to yourself. And we talk about this in financial services. We talk about paying yourself first. How do you become wealthy? You pay yourself first. You put your money into savings first. You put money into yourself first. Then you pay everything else in your life. And make sure you're always prioritizing yourself. You need to commit to yourself first. You need to make a deal with yourself. You need to really have that internal conversation. Having an accountability partner helps dramatically. Putting it in writing, putting it out in the world helps dramatically when it comes to breaking a bad habit. Bringing on a coach helps dramatically. And I think having something that's more than just about you. And this is the concept of community. This is the concept of the be rich mindset, really in application. You need to want, and we all want this, but you need to admit to yourself that you want to be more than just what you are. You want to serve, you want to help, you want to grow and inspire and be a part of a community. And if you can use that as your foundational why you're trying to change a habit, man, what a difference. What a difference it will make in your ability to break a bad habit.
Make sure that why is personal to you. Finding a why is like JB said, is super important. I think it's probably, again, one of the most important things that you can do. because that's what's going to keep the motivation to keep those 3 R's, to be consistent with that. You need something that's going to help drive it. If you're doing something because someone else says you're supposed to do it and you don't really believe it, you're not going to do it. You're not going to make it through those difficult moments. You need that why, you need that motivation behind you to drive. So setting that tone first is super important with that area. And a lot of times you can't do it alone, for multiple reasons. Things that might be out of your control. And not for everything. I think that's why I always say depends a lot, because there's different situations that lead to different habits and routines. And we're talking very generalized here. But if you get more specific into what those habits and behaviors are, there'll be more specific things that you can do to change them, and more specific ways that make it work. So again, that's also why finding some professional help around that can be very helpful.
I enjoyed this conversation, Doc. There's a lot here, and we all work on this on a regular basis. The best of us are constantly, cycling back and forth between our bad habits and the good habits that we build out. And it's kind of like a chess game in a lot of ways. So it's a good topic of conversation. I'm going to pivot us over to our third question here. And this one, it'd be interesting to see your perspective. Is this the result of bad habits, or is this something else? So I'm going to read this question off to everybody. Every time I work on a project, I wind up taking a lot longer than I thought and missing my deadlines. Please help. So, Doc, is that a symptom of bad habits?
Did we write that question? I feel like just everything that we've gone through, like in building our platforms and putting this stuff together, I get exactly where that person's coming from, right?
Amen. Right? Whew, been there.
So again, combination of stuff, depending on what the situation is for that person and what they're trying to change or put together. Some of it could be that they don't have good systems in place and they're not prepared to do the things that they need to do. They could be very bad at time management and not allowing themselves enough time to complete those tasks. It also could be some scarcity where they're not pulling the trigger on things because they're afraid of what might happen, not afraid of getting enough people interested in it. It also could be a little bit of just reality that things take a lot longer than we generally estimate them to take, especially if we've never done them before. And usually when we're setting those first examples of what time we think it's going to take, we're very excited about what we're going to do. And we know that, oh, I'm going to get this done. I'm going to spend every hour working on it. And then reality kicks in that, no, you're not. And you're going to hit those roadblocks and you're going to hit those speed bumps along the way. So I think there could be a lot of aspects into that, and probably a bunch that I even missed.
Yeah. So you talked about a lot of things: systems, poor time management, scarcity, optimism, and awareness, which I'll talk about more. I didn't really hear you mention habits. So, it's interesting. I don't think this is necessarily a symptom of bad habits. A lot of times, I think there is certain behaviors that we have blind spots to when it comes to this. And there's a lot of optimism when it comes to our own ability to accomplish. And it's an interesting thing, when you really dive into productivity and try to really get educated and learn about this, you start to get exposed to this concept that most people are pretty good at the basics of time management, kind of like the basic stuff. Most people are pretty good at, but we all have an individual capability that's either good or bad. It's just it's something you're good at or not good at, right? It's just kind of part of who you are at measuring time and being able to measure and be self-aware around time. For some people, they're very good at measuring time. I'll give you an example. I'm gonna speak to myself a little bit here. Some things I'm good at. I can wake up before my alarm to the minute about. So with my alarm set for 6 a.m., I can get up at 5:58 a.m. on a pretty darn regular basis. I have a really good conceptualization of time in my head. It's just something I'm aware of time, and I'm really kind of good at that. That's a natural talent that I have. It's maybe not the most useful talent in the world. I'm not shooting lasers out of my eyes or something, or reading people's minds, but I have a good sense for time, and I'm pretty good at making sure I'm on time, and I stick to the amount of time I have for something. So there's some natural talent there that some people have and some people don't have that influences this. But there's also a self-awareness thing, which I'm not as good at, the self-awareness side of things, Doc. And this is something that I have a challenge with, where I think there's a little bit of ego involved there, where we have a lot of confidence in our own ability to do something a lot of times, and we fall into a trap of ego and overconfidence. And there is an optimism, a sense of, hey, I can accomplish this. And one of the best examples I can give is just over the past couple of days. I set out and committed, and I said, hey, I can get something done by the end of the week, and I feel really good about it. And here we are at the end of the week, and it did not happen. I had a couple curveballs in life happen where I could not do what I wanted to do, and I was off probably by a day, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if I said I was going to get something done within 5 days and I'm off by a day, I'm off by 20%. That's a pretty big differential. So that self-awareness, that baked in optimism can be a real issue for people. And probably the easiest way to overcome it is the same way that a lot of people overcome budgeting for expenses. Let's say you want to get renovations done on the house, and a contractor tells you, hey, it's going to cost you $20,000. Well, guess what? If you're savvy, you're probably going to add 20% to the expense and say, hey, it's probably going to cost $24,000, $25,000 to do the job. And then if it takes a little bit longer and costs a little bit more, you're not surprised. We could apply that same function to the projects we're trying to get done. If I think something's going to take me a week, give yourself a little 20% buffer. You'll be a lot more likely to hit your deadline. So that's the self-awareness side of it, Doc, and how you can kind of address the optimism and ego side that might get in your way.
Well, I think anyone that's ever watched any of those remodeling shows that are all over the television for quite a many years will know there's always some magic water pipe behind the wall that they're about to tear down. So I appreciate what you're saying. It's always magically how that happens, right? To build some drama for those shows. But it is true that there is always going to be some sort of roadblock or some sort of speed bump that we can't prepare for. That we, just pops up in life, right? Sick child, flat tire, weather changes, like those things, depending on what you're doing, can be, things that you have no control over, and you just kind of have to roll with. So it also comes to a lot of the mindset, which we talk about a lot, right? So knowing what you're going to do and why it's important to you is going to be the driver that keeps you going. So similar to what we were just talking about before, like finding that why, the same kind of motivation is going to have to come from something, like to stay on task. You asked if like bad habits come into there, and that would be the only place where I can see that maybe some habits or behaviors do play a role, is that if you have some of those bad habits in the way of maybe, and this is not a knock on anyone that likes to watch TV, but maybe you like to watch TV every night and then you watch an extra hour of TV and that interrupts what you were planning to do. But you say to yourself, oh, you know what? I know I always watch 3 hours of TV a night, but for this week or two, I'm not going to do that. Are you being realistic with yourself? It's okay to watch those 3 hours of TV. If that's just something you enjoy and want to do, definitely keep doing it, but then also be realistic that you're not going to probably have during those 3 hours not to do that, unless you're really motivated to change on that.
Can I just put it out there? I do not personally advocate you watch 3 hours of TV every night.
But that's you.
I'm less okay with that personally. I'm not telling you how to live your life, but that to me, it's maybe problematic.
But it could be, and that's where I say people are different, right? So for you, that doesn't bring enjoyment. That's not something that's in your motivation. That's not something that you like. So it's not going to
Giving
be
me
important to you.
anxiety as we speak, Doc.
Right.
I
So
have
it's not going to be
anxiety over
important
that.
to you. But for others, it's their release. Someone, some people watch stuff religiously and that's their relief. That brings them that balance that we've talked about before. And that's okay. You just have to be realistic about what your balance is. So if you know that that's something that you really enjoy, that you want to do, then just plan that into what you're doing and don't think that you're going to ignore it or avoid it. It's like me telling you, JB, that getting up early every morning to go for a run and doing those things is a waste of time. Why are you doing that? You could be using that time some other way. But for you, it brings some balance. It keeps you. It's your workout. It's your health. It keeps you level. It starts your day right. Like those are the things that it's important for you, and that's how it brings you value. So you build that into your day when you're doing your schedule, knowing that you have to do that, but you also account for that, and then you do the other things around that. And that's what I'm just saying is that don't try to change what you normally do. You're not going to be in 1 week change your whole lifestyle to try to fit into something that you're trying to accomplish. Doesn't work. Never will. You can make a small change. You can try to give up maybe a half hour of that TV to get started if that's something that you want to do. But again, it's just got to be realistic of what you're trying to do is what I'm saying here. Just make sure that you are taking into consideration when you're setting these timelines, when you're setting these goals, that they are realistic to your lifestyle.
Yeah, that's it's a really important point, Doc. And it goes back to the self-awareness. How aware are you really of your ability to get something done by a certain time frame? And that takes time to learn. If you're listening in and you're asking this type of question, or you're just going, wow, geez, this is really me, right off the bat, there are a few things you can and should do. The first being review your deadlines and the goals that you've set for yourself and check to see if they're realistic. And if you've been really honest about it, don't be afraid if there's self-imposed deadlines to adjust them. Better to adjust to a more accurate goal than to put yourself in a position where you feel like you're constantly swinging and missing. That's probably not the healthiest place to be. I would also say it's okay if you don't achieve a goal you set out for. Much better to strive and make the effort and fail to achieve your goal than to never strive and make the effort at all. And take pride and celebrate that journey and focus a little less on winning or losing from a goal perspective. And you'll find that when you do miss a goal, it won't be as painful or devastating. And also on the flip side, when you do achieve a goal, you won't go through that roller coaster of emotion where it's like, oh my God, I'm elated. I've achieved this fantastic goal. Now what? Because everything was set to this goal as opposed to the journey for the goal, which is really where, that's where you live your life. It's not the momentary, profound moment. And you hear that, by the way, from Olympic athletes and from these tremendously successful people. They achieve these incredible goals and then they go, now what? And they go into depressions and they really struggle. And it's because if we put too much focus on a goal and not enough focus on everything that we do to achieve a goal, and we don't appreciate that it's the journey in the moment and not this thing we created in our head, we can end up in a bad spot. So really, from my perspective, Doc, if somebody just took those two things and really applied them in their life, it might make a huge difference in their experience here. And it might really help satisfy kind of the need that the question's stirring up, which is, how do I make sure that I don't feel like a failure? Or how do I make sure that I feel like I'm accomplishing what I want to accomplish? Those are two ways to do it for sure.
And drawing the parallels to things we've been talking about in these questions, you can see that there's connections, right? Like JB just said, as you're trying those goals, be realistic, because if you're not realistic, what's going to happen? You're going to lose all momentum because you're going to keep thinking that you're not making any progress. And that's going to be the killer of any kind of momentum that you have. We also said, look at those failures. What are those failures really doing? They're giving you evidence. The evidence there is that, okay, maybe I set the goal too lofty on this one. I didn't take anything into consideration. So as I'm setting my next goal, or as I'm working on my next project, I look at the evidence of the things that I did before, and I make adjustments. Right. So it's like all these things we've been talking about are intertwined in just in our lives and in business as we're doing these things, setting goals, finding evidence, breaking habits, learning new behaviors. All that stuff is intertwined on how we're going to be successful. So it's important to take all this stuff in. Try not to overwhelm yourself, but to take it in and start making those little bit of adjustments on each one.
Another really good question. I like this stuff. I like talking about this, Doc. It's
Our peeps
interesting.
in the EML lab they give us some good stuff.
It's stuff I think all of us work through, and all of us try to figure out, and all of us hope to get a little better at every day. This stuff. Goal setting is a tough one.
And I think the other thing that people, sometimes we feel on islands, especially as entrepreneurs, because you're doing this all on your own, right? Like you started your business and you have a goal and you have this insight and this vision of where you want to take it. And that's your vision. And not everyone has that vision together. Right. So you're on this journey, and a lot of times it's going to feel lonely. But when you hear these things and you think about it, these questions, these are not like standalone questions. These are what most people have. These challenges that we're talking about today. How do you find evidence? How do you break a habit? What do I do to stay on task? Like, these are not individuals that are like outliers. These are common questions. And we know that's true because that's why we're here, right? We have a business around it. That's why my psychology practice exists. That's why, Jay's been in sales for this long, because these are the things that we see all over and over and over again. So you're not alone, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. This is where you just, you take in the education from the people that have been there before you. And you add that to your experience, and you continue to grow. No one has all the answers either. So it's getting that combination of things and putting them together. And that's what we hope to be one part of for you.
I want to thank all of our members of the lab that shot us questions in our DM and gave us an opportunity to have these conversations with you. Thank you for that. For anybody listening in, if this is your first time listening in, we do these Q&As. We do them once a month. We tend to do them the last Friday of the month when we can. And, throughout the month, feel free to reach out to us or put a post up there, ask the questions, not just to us, but to the group. And if there's something really relevant, we'd like to dig at more, because we feel like it's something that a lot of people are working through. We might just have it here, and don't be afraid to come on live and ask us questions while we're live. We really do like picking apart some of this and offering some insight, and hopefully a little bit from our background that helps answer this. So continue listening in. If you happen to be catching this and you're not in the Entrepreneur Mastery Lab yet, the hell are you waiting for? Join our free private community. Get up in here.
Get up in here.
It's on Facebook, so you can find us there.
And, not for nothing, this is a valuable resource. I mean, this is things that we charge a lot an hour for, that you're going to get for free, that we're doing because it's a big part of what we think of in the Be Rich lifestyle, right? Is helping others along the way. And this is one way that we're giving back, but we also just believe in the community aspect of it, right? We want this knowledge out there. We want you to be successful. So take advantage of this while we're here. I mean, we're here. Take advantage of it.
God's sakes, use us.
We're nothing but tools. Wait.
Whoa, back it up. It's a whole nother band you're talking about now. All right, everybody, I'm JB. Appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. Tune in next month and we'll catch you for our upcoming weekly theme of self-awareness. Thank you again for the questions. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for being absolute rock stars. And thank you for joining us in the Be Rich mindset.
And remember, you can find us, of course, in the Facebook Entrepreneur Mastery Lab group. You can also find us on Instagram at JBandTheDoctor, as well as Twitter, as well as Pinterest. And you could always just go to our website at JBandTheDoctor.com for all kinds of information. And if you want to book a coaching session with us, that's where you would do it. So everyone, have a great day. Thanks for joining us. I'm the doctor. Peace out, yo.
JB out.